Oh man, when I swung open my garage door that fateful Monday morning, I nearly dropped my coffee. Can you imagine my shock? It looked like an Amazon warehouse had exploded right in my own home. Towering stacks of cardboard boxes were crammed from wall to wall, completely burying my tool shelves, my gym equipment, and get this, even my backup fridge, which was still humming away, bravely chugging along under a box labeled Xmas Lights. At first, I stood there, dumbfounded, thinking, have I been robbed by the world's most courteous thief? There were no broken locks, no missing items, just an army of mystery boxes squatting in my garage like they'd signed a lease and paid rent in advance. I was frozen, keys dangling in my hand, staring into this cardboard chaos, my mind racing. Is this some bizarre HOA ritual? I wondered. Like if I open the wrong box, will I accidentally summon Karen herself? Okay, let me back up a second. I live in your typical suburban neighborhood. Think manicured lawns, two-car garages, and way too many labradoodles prancing around. But the real kicker, we've got a homeowners association, and it's ruled with an iron fist by none other than Karen. Yes, her name is actually Karen, and she's the kind of person who'd slap a fine on a neighbor for daring to keep a Halloween pumpkin out past October because it wasn't seasonally neutral. Can you believe that? She struts around with a clipboard, a measuring tape, and binoculars she proudly calls her compliance kit. So trust me, this is not someone you'd want sneaking boxes into your personal space. At first, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was a mix-up. Maybe these boxes were meant for someone else, or a delivery truck got the addresses scrambled. I checked the garage door lock, still perfectly intact. No signs of a break-in. Heart pounding. I tiptoed toward one of the boxes, pried it open, and what did I find? Binders, notebooks, stacks of HOA paperwork. I flipped through one labeled Vendor Logs 2019 to 2022, and there it was, Karen's signature scrawled on nearly every page. That's when it hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't a mistake. This was a full-on hostile garage takeover. How could she? Still reeling, I marched over to Karen's house, just 5 doors down. Her place is so aggressively beige, it could double as a military camo test site. I knocked, my pulse racing, and when she opened the door, she flashed that smug smile she saves for people who dare to breathe too loudly. Before I could even get a word out, she chirped, "Oh good, you saw the boxes. I was hoping you wouldn't mind holding on to them for a few weeks." No apology, no explanation, just pure unfiltered confidence, like she was doing me a favor by turning my garage into her personal storage unit. Can you even imagine the nerve? "It's just temporary," she added, waving her hand like it was no big deal. "We needed a secure spot for HOA records while we renovate the clubhouse storage room. Now I'm not some heartless grump. I can be a team player, but using my garage without so much as a pretty please? That's not teamwork, that's straight up trespassing." I looked her dead in the eye and said, "You had no right to do this, Karen. You need to get those boxes out of my garage right now." She scoffed, like I just asked her to scrub coal off her pristine driveway. "Technically," she said, and I kid you not, this is verbatim, Section 14B of the HOA Charter allows for emergency community storage under board discretion, and I am the board. The audacity. I demanded to see the charter. She smirked and told me to look it up myself. So I did. Guess what? There's no Section 14B. The closest thing is some nonsense about paint color restrictions and acceptable flag sizes. And here's the real gut punch. I'd been out of town for a weekend camping trip, and Karen knew it. She'd timed it perfectly, waiting until I was gone, then used her HOA key to unlock my side gate, pried open the emergency override on my garage panel, and turned my space into her personal dumping ground. She even had the gall to tape a note to the sidewall that read, "Thanks, HOA appreciates your service," like I'd signed up for jury duty or something. Who does that? That night, I sat in my kitchen, rage eating cold leftover pizza, my eyes burning holes into the garage door. My tools were trapped, my gym was buried, and my backup fridge was starting to smell like something died in it. I thought about filing a complaint with the HOA, but let's be real, Karen was the HOA. That'd be like asking a fox to investigate a missing chicken coop. She genuinely believed she could get away with anything, and why wouldn't she? The whole neighborhood just rolled over for her nonsense. One guy told me she measured his grass with a ruler and fined. Another said she banned inflatable holiday decorations because they violated airspace harmony. Airspace harmony. Can you even wrap your head around that? But this wasn't some tacky lawn flamingo or a mailbox painted the wrong shade of taupe. This was my home, my garage, my sanctuary, and she'd treated it like her personal warehouse. I could feel the anger bubbling up, but it wasn't just rage, it was something sharper, colder, like the spark of a brilliant plan. I wasn't going to scream or beg, or waste my time with pointless complaints. No way. I was going to outsmart her at her own game. If she thought she could turn my garage into a community drop zone, I'd make sure the whole community got involved. Oh, this was going to be good. I stormed back into the garage, flipped on the overhead light, and stared at those boxes with a new fire in my eyes. They weren't Karen's anymore, not in my book. She'd abandoned them, trespassed to stash them here without asking, without a contract, without a dime for storage. Legally, and I say this as someone with a law degree, she had no claim whatsoever. That's when the idea hit me like a lightning bolt. I grabbed my phone, opened the Craigslist app, and started typing. Title, Free Mystery Boxes, First Come, First. I snapped pictures of the stacks, making sure no names were visible, and added, stored in my garage by someone who never came back for them. Take what you want. They've got to go. I hit publish, my heart racing with excitement. Little did I know, I just ignited a neighborhood wildfire. By the next morning, I'd completely forgotten about the listing, until a loud knock on my door yanked me out of my cereal-induced trance. A guy in a faded tank top, clutching a reusable shopping bag and grinning like he'd hit the jackpot, asked, "You still got them free box?" I blinked, my spoon halfway to my mouth. Yeah, I said, pointing to the open garage. He didn't even pause, just marched past me and started rummaging like it was Black Friday at a thrift store. What was happening? Within 15 minutes, 3 more people showed up. One guy even backed a trailer into my driveway. They came prepared with work gloves, dollies, and one dude even brought a giant thermos of coffee, like he was settling in for a full day's treasure hunt. I stood by the door, arms crossed, watching this parade of scavengers tear through Karen's cardboard empire like raccoons at a buffet, and let me tell you, it was absolutely glorious. I couldn't stop grinning. What blew my mind wasn't just that people were showing up, it was how fast the word spread. Apparently, online giveaway groups are like wildfire on steroids. Someone posted about the haul on a local community page, garage full of free stuff, lots of office supplies, and mystery items. That was it. Within an hour, cars were double parked down my street, and neighbors I hadn't spoken to in months were strolling by, curious about the commotion. It was like a chaotic pop-up flea market had erupted in my driveway. Who knew a Craigslist post could cause such a frenzy? People were yanking boxes out, ripping them open right on my lawn, holding up random objects, and shouting, "Is this part of it?" Every time, I just smiled and said, "If it's in the garage, it's yours." The real magic happened when they started digging into the content. These weren't just Christmas lights or old binders. Some boxes held the juiciest HOA secrets, financial records, neighborhood security notes, even a few dusty old surveillance cameras. A retired librarian opened a crate and gasped, "Are these HOA violation reports from?" She pulled out a manila folder labeled Authorized Mulch Usage, Anderson, Lot 4. Unauthorized mulch? Are you kidding me? The crowd started passing around papers like it was high school gossip hour. My absolute favorite moment, when a teenager unearthed a box stuffed with laminated photos, dozens of them, of people's lawns, snapped from the creepiest angles. Someone asked, "Is this some weird art project?" I bit my lip to keep from laughing. Art project? No, it was Karen's obsessive archive of neighborhood infractions. How unhinged could one person be? Then, right around noon, the drama peaked. A beige Lexus screeched around the corner and slammed to a stop in front of my house. "Oh, you know who it was." Karen leapt out, practically tripping over her orthopedic sandals, her mouth already open in a mid-scream, before the engine even cut off. "Stop, this is a crime. Those boxes are private property," she shrieked, shoving through the crowd like she was parting the Red Sea. She was waving her arms, demanding people return what they'd taken, her face redder than a stop sign. It was like watching a one-woman meltdown in real time. Could this get any better? Some folks just laughed and kept loading their trunks. Others shrugged and wandered off. A few looked confused, like what's her deal? One guy, hoisting a box of what looked like old security tapes into his van, asked, "Ma'am, are you giving these away or not?" Karen snapped, "No, those are mine," and shot me a glare that could have melted steel. I stepped forward, cool as a cucumber, and said, "You left them in my garage without permission, Karen." I assumed they were abandoned. Her face turned a shade of purple I didn't know existed. "That's not how property works. I'm the HOA president. You're obligated." I cut her off, my voice steady but sharp. "Actually, you're trespassing. This is a private property dispute. Want to get the law involved? I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over the call button. I'd be happy to tell the police how you used a garage code override to break into my home while I was out of town. Her mouth flapped open and closed like a broken puppet. The crowd went quiet, heads turning to watch this showdown. Was she really going to push this? Sensing the tide turning, Karen lowered her voice, trying to play nice. Look, I didn't mean for this to go so far. I just needed a place to store some things temporarily. I smirked. You should have asked, Karen. She muttered. I assumed you'd be reasonable. Big mistake. I shot back. Just then someone in the crowd held up a clear plastic container and yelled, Hey, this box has a check ledger from 2020 with HOA dues and vendor payments. Shouldn't this be like locked in a safe? Karen's face drained of color. That's not supposed to be here, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Boom! That was the moment her perfect facade cracked wide open. Suddenly, my petty revenge was turning into something way bigger. These weren't just random papers. They were evidence, receipts, financial logs, proof of who knows what. As Karen scrambled to snatch up as many folders as she could, I noticed neighbors pulling out their phones, filming the chaos. One guy even narrated like he was David Attenborough. Here we see the wild Karen, desperately trying to save her hoard from the villagers. I had to bite my cheek to keep from laughing out loud. This was pure gold. Karen managed to grab 3 small boxes before realizing most of her stash was already gone, loaded into cars, or halfway across town. She tried one last, desperate plea. You'll all regret this. This is illegal, she wailed. Someone in the crowd shouted back. So is breaking into someone's garage. Ouch. Karen froze, her eyes wide, then stormed to her car, peeled out, and vanished down the street. The second she was gone, someone started clapping. Then another. Soon a dozen people were cheering, high-fiving like we'd just won the Super Bowl. It was ridiculous, chaotic, and absolutely perfect. I stood at the edge of my now empty garage, hands on my hips, soaking it all in. Karen thought she was untouchable, but she'd bet on my silence, and lost everything, right in front of an audience. How's that for justice? That night, I collapsed on my couch with a cold soda, scrolling through the videos neighbors had posted on our community page. Karen's meltdown, people hauling boxes, me calmly shutting her down. It was all there, racking up hundreds of likes. Someone even added dramatic classical music and called it Karen versus the internet. I couldn't stop laughing, but deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Karen was too proud, too obsessed with control to slink away quietly. She'd come back swinging, and I had to be ready. Bring it on, Karen. 3 days later, she struck. No police, no lawyers, just her favorite weapon, an HOA emergency meeting. No warning, just a flyer slapped on the community board and slipped under her loyalists' doors. It was like something out of a conspiracy newsletter, screaming, mandatory HOA meeting, property theft, and breach of community trust. She didn't even bother inviting everyone, just her inner circle, Ellen, Greg, the anti-Halloween couple, and Gary, her treasurer, who once fined himself for recycling on the wrong day. Classic Karen. I showed up, ready for battle, with my neighbor Sherry, who'd filmed Karen's epic meltdown. We walked into the clubhouse, and there was Karen, perched at the head of a folding table like a judge in a bad TV drama. She didn't even look at me, just launched into a tirade, accusing me of grand larceny and public humiliation. She even passed around a highlighted printout of my Craigslist ad, saying, "This is betrayal." Oh please. When it was my turn, I stayed seated, calm as ever, and asked Karen, "Did you ever get my written permission to store your stuff in my garage?" She froze, then stammered, "As HOA president, I don't need permission for emergency storage. Is that in the charter?" I pressed. She nodded. Section 14B. I pulled out a copy of the charter. There's no Section 14B, Karen. I checked. Twice. The room went silent. Her allies squirmed. I kept going. I also have footage of you sneaking into my backyard and overriding my garage panel while I was gone. That's trespassing. A crime. Her face twitched. That footage is inadmissible, she snapped. It's my property, my cameras. I said, I don't need a warrant. The room erupted. Her allies fumbled, and I seized the moment. I moved to fine Karen for unauthorized access, unlawful storage, and abuse of power. Chaos. Karen slammed the table, but it was too late. The truth was out. Neighbors started texting me later, sharing their own Karen horror stories, stolen patio chairs, petty violation notices. Then Phil, the quiet accountant, called. "Check Facebook Marketplace," he said. I did. Karen's secret account was selling off HOA stuff, filing cabinets, a shredder, you name it. She wasn't just hoarding, she was profiting. Unbelievable. I called my cousin Laura, a paralegal who lives for this stuff. She's done. Laura, mail fraud, misuse of funds. Want to draft a complaint? Oh yes, we built the Karen report testimonies, screenshots, fake charter rules, highlighted in red, even a QR code to the viral video, now at 12,000 views. I sent it to every neighbor. The outrage was electric. The HOA election was days away, and Karen was in for a reckoning. Election day was like a movie. The community center was packed, buzzing with energy. Karen stood by the check-in table, her smile brittle, her allies nervous. She rushed through the agenda, but when she reached the election, I stood. I nominate myself. Gasps. Mrs. Patel seconded, then another neighbor. Karen snapped. That's not procedure. I held up the bylaws. Actually, it is. The vote was a landslide, 72 to 12. Karen was crushed. The room exploded in cheers. I promised transparency, fairness, and canceled all her fake fines. People hugged, laughed, planned a barbecue. Karen slunk out, irrelevant at last. Then a mysterious box arrived. Old HOA files, shady receipts, a spa retreat marked leadership development. Someone was spilling her secrets. I called Laura. We're going federal, she said. A week later, another box appeared, this one with personal files, neighbor surveillance, secret photos, a non-compliant watch list. A note said, she kept everything, burn it. I turned it over to the state. Investigators hit Karen's house. Her empire was crumbling. In my garage, I found one last box, photos of Karen with a stranger, postcards, a different last name, her secret life, hidden in my garage. I handed it to the authority. The HOA changed. New bylaws, no fines, a community garden, kids drew on sidewalks, Halloween decorations bloomed. At a yard sale, a teen showed me my Craigslist post, now viral on Reddit. You're a legend, he said. I posted one last ad, free HOA presidency, comes with a shovel for digging skeletons. It went viral too. Karen sold her house and vanished. The neighborhood healed, and I smiled. Sometimes, one act of entitlement and one glorious act of revenge changes everything. Oh my gosh, you should have seen the scene unfolding in my driveway. Some folks were just cracking up, completely ignoring Karen's meltdown, and kept piling boxes into their trunks like it was a free-for-all at a yard sale. Others, they just shrugged, totally unbothered, and sauntered off with their loot. A few looked downright baffled, especially when Karen, in all her frantic glory, tried to physically block their path. Ma'am, are you giving these away or not? One guy asked, hoisting a box that looked like it was stuffed with old security tapes into his van. No, those are mine, she snapped, her eyes blazing at me like I'd personally set her precious dollhouse on fire. Can you even imagine the nerve of this woman? I stepped forward, cool as a cucumber, my heart pounding, with a mix of adrenaline and glee. You left them in my garage, without my permission, Karen. I assumed they were abandoned. Her face turned a shade of purple I didn't even know was possible. That's not how property works, she screeched. I'm the HOA president. You're obligated. I cut her off, my voice sharp and steady. Actually, you're trespassing. This is a private property dispute. Want to get the law involved? I whipped out my phone, my thumb hovering over the call button, because I'd be thrilled to explain to the police how you used a garage code override to sneak into my home while I was out of town. Oh, the look on her face. It was priceless. Her mouth flapped open and closed like a malfunctioning ventriloquist dummy, and I swear I could hear the gears grinding in her head. A few onlookers paused their box grabbing to stare, their eyes wide, like they'd stumbled into a live episode of a courtroom drama. Sensing the crowd turning against her, Karen lowered her voice, trying to play the victim. Look, I didn't mean for this to go this far. I just needed a place to keep some things temporarily. I flashed a smug smile. You should have asked, Karen, she muttered under her breath. I assumed you'd be reasonable. Well, that was your first mistake, I shot back, barely containing my glee. Gotcha. Just then, someone in the crowd held up a small clear container, waving it like a trophy. Hey, this box has a check ledger from 2020 with HOA dues and vendor payments. Shouldn't this be like locked in a safe or something? Karen's face went from purple to ghostly white in a heartbeat. That's not supposed to be here, she whispered, her voice trembling. And there it was, the moment her carefully constructed armor cracked wide open. For someone who'd built her entire personality around control, Karen had just let half the neighborhood peek behind her shady curtain. How could she be so careless? What started as my petty act of revenge was suddenly snowballing into something way more delicious. These weren't just random boxes, they were a goldmine of evidence, receipts, financial logs, proof of who knows what kind of shady dealing. As Karen scrambled, practically diving into the open boxes to snatch up as many folders as she could, I caught neighbors pulling out their phones, filming every second of her panic. One guy, bless his heart, narrated the chaos like it was a National Geographic special. Here we see the wild Karen in her natural habitat, desperately attempting to rescue her horde from the angry villagers. I nearly choked trying to hold in my laughter. This was too good. Karen managed to clutch 3 measly boxes to her chest and stumble back to her car, only to realize most of her precious stash was already gone, carted off in strangers' trunks, or halfway across town. She made one last, desperate attempt to rally the crowd. "You're all going to regret this. This is illegal," she wailed, her voice cracking. Someone in the crowd fired back. "So is breaking into someone's garage." Ouch, that hit her like a slap. Karen froze, her eyes wide with shock, then stormed to her Lexus, peeled out with a screech of tires, and vanished down the street. Good riddance. The second she was gone, someone started clapping, then another. Before I knew it, a dozen people were cheering, some even high-fiving, like we'd just won a community softball championship. It was absurd, chaotic, and absolutely perfect. As the last few boxes disappeared, and my driveway cleared, I stood at the edge of my now empty garage, hands on my hips, soaking in the sweet taste of victory. Karen had tried to bulldoze me with her HOA power trip, thinking she was untouchable, but she bet on my silence, and lost everything, right in front of a cheering audience. How's that for poetic justice? That night, I flopped onto my couch, with a cold soda, my heart still racing, from the day's drama. I scrolled through the local community page, where neighbors had uploaded videos of the chaos, Karen's meltdown, people hauling boxes, me calmly shutting her down. One clip already had hundreds of likes. Someone even set it to dramatic classical music, and titled it Karen versus the Internet. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my drink, but deep down, a nagging feeling told me this wasn't over. Karen was too proud, too drunk on her own power to slink away quietly. She'd come back swinging, and I had to be ready. Bring it on. Sure enough, 3 days later, Karen crawled out of her bunker of rage, and oh did she come out swinging. I was half expecting her to show up, with a SWAT team or a pack of lawyers, but instead, she unleashed her ultimate weapon, an HOA emergency meeting. No warning, no neighborhood-wide notice, just a tacky flyer slapped on the community board and slipped under the doors of her loyal minions. The thing was dripping with bold, all-caps hysteria. Mandatory HOA meeting. Topic: property theft and breach of community trust. The nerve. And get this, she didn't even bother inviting everyone, just her inner circle of clipboard-wielding warriors. Ellen, Greg, that creepy couple from the cul-de-sac, who think Halloween is satanic, and Gary, her lapdog treasurer, who once fined himself for putting out recycling a day early. Who does that? Despite the meeting being rigged against me, I showed up, ready for battle. I brought my neighbor Sherry, who'd filmed one of the viral videos of Karen's Box Day meltdown, my secret weapon. We strutted into the clubhouse, and there was Karen, perched at the head of a long folding table like a judge, ready to banish me to HOA prison for life. She didn't even glance my way, just cleared her throat, and launched into the performance of a lifetime, her voice dripping with fake outrage. Was she for real? She accused me of grand larceny, of orchestrating a public humiliation campaign, and wait for it, damaging crucial community infrastructure. Infrastructure, seriously. In her warped mind, those cardboard boxes were the equivalent of the Liberty Bell, and I'd tossed them into a flaming dumpster. She even passed around a printout of my Craigslist listing, highlighted in aggressive yellow, waving it like evidence in a murder trial. "This, dear board, is what betrayal looks like," she declared, like she was starring in a cheesy courtroom drama. Oh, give me a break. When it was my turn to speak, I stayed seated, calm as ever, my heart pounding with anticipation. I leaned forward and asked one simple question. "Karen, did you ever get my written permission to store your junk in my garage?" She froze, her eyes blinking rapidly, then stammered, "As president of the HOA, I don't need explicit permission for temporary storage in the event of emergency preservation of community records." "Oh, really? Is that in the charter?" I pressed, my voice steady but laced with challenge. She nodded, too quickly. Section 14B. I slowly pulled a stapled packet from my folder, savoring the moment. There is no Section 14B, Karen. I've read the entire HOA charter twice. I even brought copies for anyone who wants to check. The room fell silent, the kind of silence that screams trouble. Gary, her loyal treasurer, grabbed a copy, his eyes scanning the pages. Greg leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Ellen narrowed her eyes, whispering to the woman next to her. The doubt was spreading like wildfire. For the record, I continued, my voice cutting through the tension, I have camera footage of you sneaking into my backyard and using the garage panel override while I was out of town. No request, no notice, just trespassing. That's a crime, by the way. Karen's face twitched, her composure crumbling. That footage is inadmissible without a proper warrant, she snapped, her voice shrill. I smirked. It's my property, my security cameras. I don't need a warrant to watch what happens in my own garage. Boom, the crowd gasped. Gary was now flipping through the charter, his lips moving, as he read, clearly rattled. Ellen's whispers grew louder. Karen, sensing her grip slipping, slammed her hand on the table, her voice booming. This meeting is not about my actions. It's about community violation. Exactly, I fired back, my voice calm but razor sharp, and I'd like to submit a motion to fine you, Karen, for unauthorized access to a resident's home, unlawful storage of HOA property, and abuse of presidential power. Oh, the chaos that erupted. Gary's glasses slid down his nose as he fumbled with his notes, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Ellen tried to ask a question, only to get shushed by Karen, who was unraveling before our eyes. But the damage was done. People were talking, whispering, doubting, finally peeking behind the polished curtain of control she'd kept drawn for years. Her empire was crumbling, and I was loving every second of it. That night, as I walked home, my phone buzzed nonstop. Neighbors texted, spilling their own Karen horror stories. One said she'd borrowed their patio chairs for an official HOA event and never returned them. Another refused to store an HOA file box and got a passive-aggressive violation notice the next day. The resentment was boiling over. Karen's reign of terror was unraveling, and I was at the center of it all, ready to see how far this revolution would go. Watch out, Karen, the storm's just getting started. Oh my gosh, just when I thought this saga couldn't get any wilder, the real bombshell dropped. I was still riding the high from exposing Karen's garage invasion when my phone buzzed with a call from Phil, the quiet retired accountant, who lives tucked away at the back of our neighborhood. He's the kind of guy who keeps to himself but somehow knows everything, like he's got a secret radar for neighborhood drama. You gotta check Facebook Marketplace, he said, his voice low and urgent. What? Why? I asked, my curiosity spiked. He sent me a link, and when I clicked it, my jaw hit the floor. There it was, Karen's resale account, listed under a sneaky alias, but with a profile picture of her dog decked out in a tacky Christmas sweater, unmistakably hers, and the items for sale: office furniture, filing cabinets, even a used shredder labeled lightly used, works great, all straight from the stash she dumped in my garage. Can you believe the audacity? Stared at my screen, absolutely stunned. This wasn't just Karen hoarding HOA junk, she was flip it for profit, using our neighborhood like her personal pawn shop. No wonder she freaked out when her boxes started disappearing. It wasn't about privacy or pride, it was about losing her shady side hustles inventory. My blood boiled, but my lawyer brain kicked into gear. I took screenshots of every single listing, every photo, every timestamp, my fingers flying across the screen. Then I called my cousin Laura, a paralegal who lives for this kind of petty justice. Laura, you won't believe this, I said, practically shouting. When I spilled the tea, she cackled. Oh, she's cooked. That's mail fraud, misuse of funds, maybe even tax evasion, if she didn't report that income. Want me to help draft a formal complaint? Did I ever? Yes, Laura. Let's bury her, I replied, my heart racing with righteous fury. By the end of the week, I'd put together a packet so explosive it could have starred in an HBO miniseries. I dubbed it the Karen Report, and let me tell you, it was a masterpiece. Inside were neighbor testimonies, those damning marketplace screenshots, financial records riddled with inconsistencies, and a copy of the HOA charter with every fake rule Karen had invented, highlighted in bright red. I even threw in a QR code linking to the garage giveaway video, which had skyrocketed to over 12,000 views, instead of just handing it to the board or Karen Ha, as if I went big. I distributed it to every single resident in the neighborhood, slipping it under doors, stuffing it in mailboxes, emailing it to every address I had. This was war, and I was bringing the truth to everyone. How's that for a power move? People rate it, and oh, did they. The neighborhood was buzzing, and folks were pissed. Karen had spent years strutting around like a miniature dictator in her pastel sweaters, lording over us with her clipboard and fake rules. But she'd gotten greedy, sloppy, and now the curtain was ripped down. The whispers that had simmered for years turned into full-on shouting, and for the first time there was a loud, united demand for change. Could this really be happening? The community was waking up and I was at the heart of it. I knew the next battle was coming fast. The annual HOA election was just days away, and this time, people were paying attention. Karen would fight back. She always did, like a cornered cat with a superiority complex. But now I had the truth, solid proof, and about 70% of the neighborhood rallying behind me. She wasn't ready for what was coming, and honestly, neither was I. This was about to get epic. Election day rolled in like a storm cloud that had been brewing for years, dark and electric with anticipation. The annual HOA meeting usually drew a sad little crowd of 15, dragged in by their spouses or bribed with free coffee. But today, the community center parking lot was packed to the brim. People clustered outside, murmuring with the kind of excitement you'd expect at a playoff game or a courtroom showdown. You could feel it in the air. Something huge was about to go down. Was this really our sleepy little neighborhood? At the center of it all, of course, was Karen, standing by the check-in table in her signature beige pantsuit. Her smile stretched so wide, it looked painful. The corners of her mouth twitched every time someone passed without a nod, and I could tell she was rattled. Her loyal minions, Ellen and Greg, flanked her like nervous bodyguards, but something was off. Maybe it was the crowd's energy, or the subtle glares from neighbors they used to bully, but they looked uneasy, their usual smugness fading. Karen, despite her polished act, couldn't hide the cracks in her confidence. Was her reign finally crumbling? Inside, the room was a mess of uneven chairs, with a folding table up front that looked like a budget debate stage. Karen sat dead center, her papers neatly stacked, a water bottle labeled with her name, as if her obsessive organization could shield her from the storm. I took a seat 3 rows back, close enough to catch every flicker of her expression, but far enough to stay cool. Sherry and Phil sat beside me, clutching copies of the Karen report, ready to field any questions. Neighbors were already flipping through the packet, their mouths curling in disbelief or stifled laughter as they read those infamous screenshots. The tension was electric. Karen called the meeting to order with a tight, fake smile, her voice dripping with the authority that had ruled this room for years. She raced through the agenda, clearly desperate to avoid open discussion before things got messy. But messy was already here, sitting in every chair, clutching every document, whispering in every ear. This wasn't just about me or those boxes anymore. It was about years of her manipulative finds, her unchecked control, her overreach disguised as order. Could she really think she'd skate through this? When she reached the final agenda item, election of board positions, she paused, expecting her usual automatic reappointment. As there are no new nominations, I nominate myself, I shouted, standing tall. Every head whipped around, and Karen froze mid-sentence, blinking like I'd just spoken in tongues. A beat passed, then Mrs. Patel, who Karen once fined for her kid's sidewalk chalk art, raised her hand. Seconded, she called. Another voice from the back chimed in. I second that too. A ripple of claps broke out. Oh, this was happening. Karen's smile vanished. She gripped the table, so hard her knuckles turned white, her voice sharp as a knife. That's not proper procedure. Nominations were supposed to be submitted 2 weeks ago. I held up a printed email from the HOA bylaws, my heart pounding with triumph. Actually, nominations can be made at the meeting if there's a quorum, which we have, probably for the first time in HOA history. A hush fell over the room. She was trapped, and everyone knew it. How sweet was that? Gary, the treasurer who'd been inching away from Karen's sinking ship since the report dropped, cleared his throat. He's right, the bylaws allow it. The vote began, ballots passed out, and people took their time, marking their choices with care. When the final tally came in, Karen stared at the result sheet like it was her own obituary. She'd lost crushed, 72 votes to 12, a total landslide. Can you imagine the shock on her face? She didn't speak, didn't argue, just sat there, blinking in stunned silence, as her world collapsed, like a sandcastle under a tidal wave. The room erupted in applause, cheers, and scattered whoops. I walked to the front, not to rub it in, but to thank you all for showing up, for making your voices heard, I said, my voice steady but brimming with emotion. I promised transparency, fairness, and a full audit of Karen's shady decision. Then I dropped the bombshell. As our first act, we're dissolving all pending fines issued under Karen's fake rules. The crowd roared, clapping louder, laughing, some even wiping away happy tears. It was pure euphoria, like a spell had been shattered right before our eyes. Karen didn't stick around. She grabbed her papers, muttering under her breath, and marched out, her loyalists trailing like lost ducklings. No one stopped her. No one cared. She'd become what she feared most, irrelevant. That evening, as the sun sank behind the houses, the air thick with the scent of fresh grass and barbecue smoke, I sat on my porch, watching kids ride bikes, without fear of her citations, neighbors chatting about their gardens, their dogs, their lives. The community was healing, slowly but surely. The fear that had silenced us for years was gone, like morning fog burned away by the sun. Was this really our neighborhood now? Then something wild happened. A delivery van pulled up, and the driver handed me an unmarked, taped shut box, addressed to me. No sender, no labels, just a plain cardboard mystery. My curiosity was buzzing as I signed for it. I hauled it inside, set it on the kitchen table, and opened it slowly, my heart thumping. Inside were more HOA files, but these were different, older, some yellowed with age, others freshly printed. There were internal notes, emails, and a ledger of sketchy expenses going back years, outrageous vendor payments, gift purchases labeled community enrichment, even a receipt for a spa retreat Karen had marked as leadership development. And get this, a folder labeled to be destroyed. What was she hiding? This was bigger than I'd ever imagined. I sat there, staring at the pile of documents on my kitchen table, a chilling realization washing over me like a cold wave. Someone had dropped this box off on purpose. Was it one of Karen's loyal minions finally breaking ranks, or maybe someone who just had enough of covering for her? Whatever the reason, this was bigger than anything I'd uncovered so far, way bigger. My heart raced as I picked up the phone and dialed Laura again, my fingers trembling with anticipation. She answered on the first ring, her voice dripping with curiosity. So, what's the latest? Did she set something on fire yet? Oh, it's worse, I said, my voice practically shaking, as I flipped through a printed email chain, revealing Karen's ultimate betrayal. She'd killed a community park proposal, just to funnel the funds into repainting the clubhouse in her favorite shade of beige. Can you even imagine the I think we just found the real reason she was so desperate to get those boxes back. Laura let out a dramatic sigh. All right, cousin, we're going federal with this. Federal. The word alone sent a thrill down my spine. As I leaned back in my chair, surrounded by the smoldering ruins of Karen's empire and these files that could finally bury her for good, a sly smile crept across my face. This wasn't just about my garage anymore. Oh no, it never really was. This was about power, abuse, entitlement, and at long last, consequences. I could almost hear the victory music swelling in the background. Karen had underestimated me, and now her carefully constructed world was crumbling. Bring it on. A week after the election, the neighborhood felt eerily quiet, too quiet, like the calm before a villain makes their dramatic comeback. Everything was healing so fast, it was almost surreal. Lawns glowed greener, neighbors waved with genuine carefree smiles, and that dark shadow that had loomed over every mailbox and garden gnome was finally gone. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing. Karen had vanished from community life. No snarky HOA newsletters, no passive-aggressive memos, not even a single complaint about a barking dog. That wasn't her style. She didn't just fade away. She plotted, schemed, waited in the wings, like a soap opera antagonist. What was she up to? Sure enough, the calm shattered when a second mysterious box appeared on my doorstep. No courier, no knock, just there, sitting like a silent secret when I opened the door to water my plant. It was sealed tight with black duct tape, no markings, no label, just my name scrawled in bold red ink across the top. My stomach dropped. Was this a trap? I stared at it for what felt like forever, half expecting it to start ticking like a cartoon bomb. Finally, I mustered the courage to drag it inside, my heart pounding. When I sliced it open, the contents stopped me dead in my tracks. These weren't just more HOA papers. These were personal files on individual neighbors, with printouts of their social media posts, handwritten notes, in the margins, listing who'd gotten warnings, who dared to challenge her, who had unpaid fines. There were screenshots from our neighborhood Facebook group, and get this, secretly taken photos of people's private property. Karen had been running a full-blown surveillance operation. One folder was labeled non-compliant watch list. Another, probation candidate. I felt sick to my stomach. Who does this? She hadn't just crossed a line. She'd pole vaulted over it, dragging her clipboard and petty tyranny along for the ride. It hit me like a freight train. Those boxes in my garage weren't just overflow paperwork. They were her fortress of leverage. Karen didn't just enforce rules. She weaponized them, collecting dirt on neighbors to keep them quiet, to bend them to her iron will. But why was this delivered to me now? I rummaged through the box, my hands shaking, and found a handwritten note taped beneath the last folder. No name, just 4 chilling words. She kept everything. Burn it. The handwriting wasn't Karen's. Someone had betrayed her. Maybe a disgruntled ally. Maybe someone who'd finally seen enough of her reign of terror. My mind was racing. Who could it be? I knew I couldn't sit on this dynamite. I called Laura again, my voice urgent. By the next day, we were on the phone with state authorities, spilling everything. They launched an inquiry, not just into Karen's dictatorship, but into the HOA's financial dealings over the past 5 years. It was massive, way bigger than anyone could have imagined. Vendor kickbacks, wildly inflated budgets for landscaping and so-called beautification initiatives, missing community improvement funds. It was all there, a perfect paper trail, meticulously cataloged by the very person who thought she'd never get caught. How could she be so arrogant? Within a week, investigators showed up at Karen's house. No sirens or handcuffs yet, but the neighborhood grapevine was buzzing like a beehive. People saw, people whispered, and the walls were closing in on her. I overheard one neighbor at the park, muttering, "I heard they found a hidden filing cabinet stuffed in her attic." True or not, it didn't matter. The spell was broken. Her fortress of fear had collapsed, and the community was finally free. Was this really the end? I thought justice might have finally won, that I could move on and breathe easy. But then came the final, jaw-dropping twist. I was in my garage, reorganizing my shelves for the first time in weeks, feeling like I'd reclaimed my space, when I spotted something odd tucked behind the backup fridge. A small, shoebox-sized container, wedged between the wall and a rusty paint can. I yanked it out, dusted off the cobwebs, and opened it, my heart thumping. Inside were photos, not of the neighborhood, not of fences or lawns, but of Karen, smiling, laughing, holding hands with a man I didn't recognize. There were postcards from Aruba, Costa Rica, airline tickets, receipts, and an envelope with a different last name. My mind reeled. Was this for real? Karen had a secret life, an entirely hidden identity, maybe even another marriage, all sealed away in this tiny box. It hit me like a lightning bolt. This was why she'd panicked that day, when people were rummaging through her boxes. It wasn't just HOA secrets, it was personal. She'd stashed her entire double life in my garage, thinking no one would ever dare touch it, and now it had all unraveled right in front of her, one accidental box at a time. Her perfectly controlled world, built on secrets and manipulation, was exposed to the world. How did it come to this? I didn't keep the box or dig deeper. I handed it straight to the investigators and walked away, not because I wasn't curious, but because I realized this wasn't about Karen anymore. It was about everyone she'd crushed to keep her tower standing tall. The HOA transformed after that, and it was glorious. We rewrote the bylaws, tossed out vague clauses, and banned those ridiculous fines. Transparency became our new mantra, and people felt empowered to speak up, vote, and actually participate. We even added a community garden. Can you imagine the joy? Kids were back to chalking the sidewalks. Halloween decorations popped up everywhere, and for the first time in years, it truly felt like a neighborhood again. One sunny Saturday morning, I hosted a yard sale, not because I needed cash, but because we all craved connection after years of Karen's reign. We set up booths, shared ice-cold lemonade, swapped stories, and someone even brought a speaker for music. It was perfect. Toward the end of the day, a teenager who'd helped during the original box giveaway ran up, grinning ear to ear. "Dude, you're trending again," he said, shoving his phone in my face. A screenshot of my Craigslist post had blown up on a viral subreddit, racking up thousands of upvotes. Commenters were cheering, calling it the ultimate petty revenge. My favorite, she weaponized bureaucracy, he weaponized Craigslist. This is the duel of the century. I laughed so hard I nearly cried. That night, I posted one final ad, just for I snapped a photo of my pristine organized garage and titled it, Free HOA, Presidency, Slightly Used, comes with a bonus shovel for digging up skeletons. I didn't expect it to go anywhere, but it went viral again. This time, it wasn't just about Karen, it was about what we'd built in her wake. People from other neighborhoods reached out begging for advice, sharing their own HOA horror stories. Some even sent pics of their garage makeovers. In solidarity, HOA reform through pettiness was now a movement, and I was at the heart of it. Who would have thought? Karen quietly sold her house. No farewell, no goodbyes. One day she was there, the next, poof, gone. Rumors swirled that she'd fled out of state, maybe to start fresh, where no one knew her past. As for me, I didn't run for HOA president again. We had a board of real neighbors now, not power-hungry enforcers. People still ask about the boxes, chuckling as they bring it up. It's become neighborhood legend. The time a garage sparked a revolution. Sometimes, all it takes is one outrageous act of entitlement to tip the scales, and one bold, delicious act of revenge to make everything right.